Status and power. Linguistic research has shown that there is a direct link between a person's status, hierarchical and social position, and the vocabulary they use. In other words, the higher up the social or hierarchical pyramid a person is, the more effectively he or she is able to communicate verbally. Research on nonverbal communication shows that there is an inverse relationship between a person's mastery of the art of oral communication and the amount of gesticulation used to supplement the verbal information being conveyed. This means that a person's status, amount of power and prestige is also inversely related to the number of gestures or number of body movements during communication. A person at the top of a social or hierarchical pyramid is likely to be able to convey his or her thoughts by relying solely on the power of his or her words and eloquence, whereas a less educated or less accomplished person will rely more on words than on gestures. It is important to remember the general rule: the higher the position one occupies, the higher on the socioeconomic pyramid, the less gesticulation and body movements they use. The speed of some gestures, and the extent to which they are obvious to others, also depends on the age of the individual. For example, if a 5-year-old child tries to deceive his parents by telling an untruth, he or she will immediately cover his or her mouth with one or both hands. This gesture by the child should always be a warning to the parents that the child may be trying to deceive them. The gesture of covering the mouth is used throughout life, it only changes its nature and speed. When a teenager lies, he puts his hand to his mouth like a 5-year-old, but his gesture is more subtle and less noticeable. Instead of suddenly grabbing his mouth, he just barely rubs his face around his lips. This gesture is not in principle nothing more than a subtle version of the mouth covering used in childhood. As an individual grows up, many of his gestures become more subtle and less obvious, so the gestures of a person in his or her 50s are usually much harder to read than those of a much younger interlocutor. Don't forget to click the subscribe button to help my channel grow, giving me the motivation to keep creating content. Other factors influencing the interpretation of nonverbal signals. A person who is characterized by the so-called dead fish handshake is generally considered to be weak in character. We will look at the reasons for this common perception when we talk about handshake technique. However, it is possible that the person in question has arthritis in his joints, so the reason for his weak handshake is simply to avoid the pain. Similarly, artists, musicians, surgeons and other professions that rely on brilliant handwork as a key factor for success tend to avoid squeezing the interlocutor's hand hard. And if the partner is willing to click hard, while protecting their hands, such people may use full palm release, or dead fish, technique. Tight or ill-fitting clothing may prevent the use of desired gestures, which can eviscerate body language. This is, of course, true in a limited number of cases, but it is important to bear in mind that a person's physical limitations can have a significant impact on their nonverbal expression. We'll talk more in the next episode. See you soon.